Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. It's great to see some familiar names and faces there in the lineup, and this is really exciting. It's our first session for 2024 for WIA, and what was that? It's Christine. Yeah, and we welcome all of you. So thanks so much for helping us establish and build WIA Australia. So we are all about creating diversity of thought, and we need more architects to be able to transform a lot of the legacy businesses and to scale smaller businesses. And to be able to do that, we need to be able to recruit more architects into the profession. So part of that diversity is gender, but there's a lot more aspects to it. So really glad to see people from different backgrounds joining this call this evening. And I just wanted to introduce the people that we run WIA with. So we've got Dr. Chritsine Stevenson joining us as well tonight. So Chritsine and I are co-chairs for WIA Australia, and we're supported by Darryl. So he's helped us establish and build the presence here locally, and we do that in conjunction with the global community. So Wendy wasn't able to make it this evening, so Wendy Keane, she's helped us establish this local presence here as well. And we've also got Martin, who helps us run WIA. So he's been helping us. He's been a great addition to the team as well. And it's a really exciting topic tonight. So I just wanted to cover off. We'll be hearing from Bard this evening, and then we'll be followed by a panel with Maggy and Miranda this evening. So that really looking forward to that. And we'll provide an update of what we've been doing and where we're at today, and then where we're going to next with WIA. Thanks. Next slide. So I've done the introductions, and I'll introduce Bard. So I just wanted to share a personal story about my inroads into architecture and how Bard has helped me establish myself in the career and feel confident moving into the career. And I'm hoping that I can help channel my inner Bard and help others on their journey as well. So I met Bard, it would have been 13 years ago, and I was joining a study group for enterprise architecture, and Bard was talking all about the emotional side of the role and connection with people, and the human side. So a lot of the emotional intelligence and rapport building and community, the sense of community within architecture, because the business stakeholders are so very important. And he was doing some really important work with his late wife, Mikal, and it was really groundbreaking, because it took it out of the mechanics of architecture itself, out of the nuts and bolts, and it was a game changer for me, and it helped me feel like there was a place for me in architecture. Bard's also moved to so he was the VP for research at Gartner, and did some really great work there. Hosts a lot of big conferences, and did a lot of CEO coaching. And now his wife Paulina and they're both over at Netherlands at the moment, so they've been having a great time over there through the renovating a cottage from memory, Bard. So they both live there at the moment, and Bard does a lot of coaching, works with Chritsine to do a lot of coaching work as well. Without further ado, I will hand over to Bard to take us through how it begins with caring. Thanks.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Yeah, I remember it well, Heidi. That was fun. The enterprise architecture course that Morris gave. And then I came up and talked about emotional intelligence, and I still remember the bewilderment on some people's faces about, what is that? Why are we talking about emotions? This is supposed to be about architecture. I think I convinced a few people that is actually very closely related. So yeah, I'm actually in the Netherlands because of COVID. So I wasn't there. I was there on work visit, and then COVID happened, and for more than a year we didn't manage to get back home. And then we had some family issues here that made us stay. And so for now, I call myself a Dutch-born Aussie gone back to the Netherlands. because I still feel more Australian than Dutch. But it doesn't. The one thing that COVID changed, I think, for the profession as well, is that it's become easier to work remotely. And so it matters even less where we are as long as we stay connected. So why did I come up with this topic of it begins with caring? Well, this is what I wrote yesterday on LinkedIn. Everything we do is about people. That's actually the whole basis for anything that people do, is we should never forget that it's always about people, ultimately. Even if we don't think about them, we impact them. Even if we think we're just, changing an app or we're changing a network, at some point there will be people involved, and that is what matters. So that is a form of interhuman interaction. And here's the curious thing about people. And if you can show the next slide, then I'll forget about this whole story. And I just want to, everybody is now sort of comfortable with CNEX. It starts with why. Well, it doesn't really. It starts with why it matters, right? And what matters is what you feel about something. So in all the work that I've done in IT and in coaching and in culture and change and all these things, it always came down to one fundamental issue. And that is, how does it make people feel? If you get that wrong, nothing much happens or nothing much good happens. If you get it right, impossible things become possible. So it's about what people feel. Now let's unpeel this a bit, because I thought about this whole topic and I thought, there's layers to this. So for one thing we could talk about today, and I think that's really important as a group, is why do we care about the profession? What drove us here? What brought us to this profession of architect? What did we think that it would accomplish? Then the next layer of that is, and then why are we here together then talking about it? What brings us together as a group? And what do we think that this group should be? What do we think the profession should be? And what do we think we as a group should be? What do we care about? And from what do we care about, it's also how do we care for each other? How can we help each other become more, I'm hesitant to say successful. Let me do a little sidetrack here. That this is something that's been on my mind lately, and I fight with a lot of people over it. Does it matter if you're successful? Or does it matter more that you contribute, that you have a positive impact? Those two things are not always the same, right? I've been successful, especially within Gartner. I rose to fame, quite surprisingly to myself, actually. I was a bloke from Gin, and before I knew it, I was in Orlando talking to 6,000 people, and I thought, who am I to stand here in front of 6,000 people? The success never really mattered to me, I found out. What mattered was that some people that were in the audience then went and did something good, right? But some people came back to me and said, yeah, what you said really made an impact on me and made me change something in my life for the better. It's a little bit like Heidi says, right? I met Heidi and I accidentally tripped her into architecture. I hope it's a good thing. But so to me, personal success has always mattered less than the positive impact that I'm trying to have on the world. And I've talked to a lot of architects over time. And a lot of IT people actually too. And I think that is a common theme that runs through our profession, is that we're not really chasing personal success. If we were, we would have ended up in sales, or we would have been, a hard-driving executive by now. Now, we really care about the world and we want to improve the world. That is a common theme that runs through this whole profession. So let's not think about success, but let's think about positive impact. How can we help each other as a group and as individuals to have a more positive, maybe even a more lasting impact on the world? And that is basically the core of what I would like us to talk about today. But of course, it also means that we have to find the heart of the matter, and that is, And what is a positive impact then? And how do we recognize it when we run into it? How do you know that you're doing the right thing versus the wrong thing? How do you tell right story from wrong story? I was just inspired by a book I recently read that had that title, Right Story, Wrong Story. How do you know it's a right story? That we're on track? Well, that's actually where caring plays a major factor. And that is that it comes down to listening to each other and feeling what is going on in the room rather than thinking about what is going on in the room. It's the same with the profession. How do we know this profession is heading in the right direction? I know that you had a beautiful meeting in Australia not that long ago where that same topic was being discussed. And I wasn't there because I was on the other side of the planet, but I reckon there were some emotions happening there. There may even have been some conflicts. There may have been some tension. And when you do it from caring, that kind of debate, when you do it from the heart, conflicts are fine, right? Drama is fine because that shows where the issues are. That shows what people really care about. So let's have a sort of an agreement that it's okay to have conflict. It's okay to have drama. It's okay to disagree with each other, as long as we do it from the heart and as long as we see the disagreement as something that we then explore and learn from. Right? If there's no drama, people may not actually care. I was half tempted to write it on the slide, but I thought maybe people will misunderstand me. But I was thinking, if there's no drama, is there really love? Because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Right? So one message that I wanted to give here is let's not fight each other, but let's be very dramatic when we need to. Have nice, fierce conflicts. As long as we do it from love, that's fine. Let's approach the world in the same way. Let's not shun the drama. Let's use the drama to figure out what people really care about and how we can then connect to that. And this is something that I worry about in the architecture community at large, which I hope that this community can do better, is the architecture community at large has sort of retreated into the trenches of hardcore IT and inward focus. As long as we do our job correctly, we produce the right diagrams and the right documents, and we tick off all the boxes, we have done our work. We don't really connect to stakeholders much because they're just difficult and hateful and annoying. And so we just connect to let's say, the hardcore data and technology that is much easier to fight with because it can't talk back. Let's not do that. Let us be a group that goes outwards and upwards and say, no, what we do matters because it impacts everybody. And we want to do the best for people. We want to connect people. We want to bring them together and achieve bigger things than they can alone. We're part of that world, not separate from it. And again, this is my biggest worry for the architecture profession, is that it has become very entrenched and very disconnected. And why women in architecture? Well, because I feel that, first of all, we need diversity, point, right? If we have only single perspectives, then we put blinders on and we only see very small parts of the world. But also, I think there is something about the feminine versus the masculine approach to things, which is not necessarily strictly gender related. I have to say that up front, right? I know some men that can do the whole feminine thing, sometimes even better than some of the women I know. And I know some women that can definitely do the masculine approach. But in general, we need balance. If we want to get this right, we need the balance between the masculine and the feminine approach. Now, what is the difference? Broadly speaking, the feminine approach is to form circles and connect people in circles and make sure that those connections are in place before we move. The feminine principle is a circling and spiraling principle, where we don't go in a straight line. We see something and we jump on it. No, we circle around to make sure we understand the context. We see what is out there and how it is connected before we even make a move. That is very much lacking in the whole world, basically, maybe even the whole business world too. Is we go into straight lines from problem to solution without even understanding the whole context, the whole web of interconnectedness. And so, yeah, we solve one thing, and in the process, we create more problems than we care for. We used to say that there's never a solution we don't have a problem for. Well, it's actually every solution is a problem nowadays, because we haven't done the circling around. So that's one part of the feminine part. Now, we do need the masculine part as well at times, where you go into a straight line. Is once you really need to get into action, then that's when the straight lines are appropriate, right? If you don't have that balance, you may stay circling forever. That might not be good, although I find it quite comfortable actually to circle. So for me, this whole women in architecture movement is about getting the balance right, which does mean, men in the room, that we have to shut up more often and be more supportive, and realize that whenever we have the urge to jump into action, it may actually not be the right time to do so. Right? So I hesitated for quite a long time when I was asked to do this. It says, can I actually do this without being a typical male? So I hope I have avoided that, because I always have that urge to jump into action. And I need some strong women around me to say, not now, Bart. Go back into, go back into your cave until we call you. It's not the time for action now. It's the time for reflection and connection. That's actually all I wanted to say. I know I have some more time, but why would I use that time if I've said what I wanted to say? So, summary, nothing matters unless it has a heart. You need to feel what you care about and who you want to care for. As a profession, we need to learn to care for each other, and we need to learn to care for the impact we have on the world, and then support each other in achieving that impact. And I think that's what we're here for. And if there's any way I can help that grow and prosper, then can I say I'm your man? So over to you guys and girls and women and everybody. I have to be careful when I say you guys. Is that offensive in any way? Paulina always cautions me about using it.
I think, assuming good intentions, I don't think any disrespect was meant from the term. No. So no offense taken from me. And would anyone like to ask any questions? I'm dying to, but I'm going to take a back seat this evening. There's a few people that I know will have questions. Oh, Amy said, I'd love to hear the thoughts on how to deal with sales egos.
So is that a question to me or a question in general? Because shall I start?
Question with you. A question for you, I think.
Okay. Well, first of all, what is sales ego really? Right? I've dealt with salespeople for a long time, and so the first question I always ask is, so what is driving them? What is motivating them to be, for instance, to be aggressive, to be dismissive of everybody else? There's two answers. There's two types of sales egos I've come across. One is the fear-driven one. That is simply that they don't feel that they are important until they have something to show for it, right? So their sense of self-worth is actually quite low. And so they're looking for external signals and external evidence that they matter. That's the fear-driven ones. And then there's actually another group, which is a quite interesting group, and they're not fear-driven. They're so convinced that they have the right thing and the right solution. They're so helpful that they keep throwing helpful solutions at people even when they don't need them. And you need to separate those two levels of ego. So the ones that are overly helpful and overly eager to please are not necessarily the same ones that are purely fear-driven and need to succeed in order to even feel that they have the right to exist. Now, the fear-driven ones, the only way you can really deal with people that are driven from fear is to find out why they are afraid and find ways of reducing that fear in them until you reach a level that you can talk to them. So become their ally, show that you're on their side, that you have something that can help them. And then when they feel that you're no longer a threat, then maybe you can talk about different things and different approaches and rebalancing the thing. With the enthusiasts, it's sometimes quite hard actually to stop them. With the enthusiasts, you start with just praising them and basically convincing them that they've already helped so much that it may be time to take a step back and reflect on things rather than keep running. So those are just two general strategies, but the overall strategy underneath is always figure out first why people behave the way they do. What are their internal drivers? What is the thing they really care about most? And from there, you can find ways to connect to them. Never fight an ego. That's actually my strictest rule to myself as well, because it includes my own ego. When you fight an ego, it will just play up harder.
That's good advice, Bard. Good life advice. Did anyone else want to be brave and go on camera and ask a question or type it in the chat?
There's a couple of
we got some
points
here.
in the chat. Yep.
So Louise has written, how are your C-suite executives embracing it starts with caring approach? Some leaders lack empathy, so I'm interested to know if they are open to this approach.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've always wondered about that. I'm not sure how many people really lack empathy, because it's one of the deepest instincts that we're born with, is to connect to other people, and we're a deeply social species. I mean, if you take into account that when we're born, we're completely helpless and completely dependent on the people around us, you can understand why it's so important for us to connect to people. Right? It may be even stronger than our survival drive is our need to be connected to people. So I'm not sure that there are many people without empathy. There may be a small percentage. We call them psychopaths or sociopaths, but that's a really small minority. I think the people that demonstrate a lack of empathy are actually hiding it from themselves as well. They've learned to suppress their empathy. So that's my observation, even with really hardcore CEOs and executives in general, that it's not that they lack empathy, they don't dare to show it. Which brings me back to, there's a lot of fear underneath. And there's also a narrative that they've fallen for, and that is the narrative of business is business, right? Success is all that matters. Money is all that matters. Results is all that matters. They feel somewhere that that's not right, but they don't dare to confront that in the open. So they steer away from empathy because it raises too many difficult questions. Now, as an architect, you can sort of open the way for more empathy by linking the human story to their success story. Right? And I sometimes hesitate to do it because it feels a little bit disingenuous, but when you tell them, look, if people are not comfortable, if people do not see that you care for them, why would they work for you? Why would they produce the results you need? So I slowly convinced them that being nice is actually a good business practice, and that being empathetic is part of an executive's behavior. And then they fake it at first. So I help them fake it. And the funny thing is, the more they fake it, the more they start feeling it. So my coaching work with executives has always surprised me is in the sense that you make it a little play where you say, look, just pretend you care about people and see what happens. And then because they care about people, they start actually caring. So I don't give up on a lot of people. That there are always exceptions, right? There's some people that I can't work with because they simply don't seem to get it. But I don't really believe that they lack empathy. As I said, I believe they've learned to suppress it. So find ways of opening it. And that goes on every level of management. One thing I also want to say, part of the caring approach, when you see people behaving badly, don't immediately judge them on the bad behavior, but ask yourself, what pain is causing them to do that? That's a question that has really helped me a lot in figuring out what really drove people is. There must be some pain underneath that, or they wouldn't be this hurtful and spiteful and nasty. So make that an architecture question as well. So what pain is driving people to bad behavior? Because then instead of giving them all sorts of solutions that doesn't actually do much for them, you may be able to reduce some of that pain and become incredibly helpful and impactful. Now, imagine being a CEO. I think most of us don't want to be CEOs. There's a lot of pain that they suffer from, that some of that pain we may be able to take away.
It's really useful, Bard. Really interesting insights. We've also got a question from Warren. He's asked, Bard, how do you tackle difficult stakeholders in a business who believe there is not a need for architecture in the business?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, some of us have done that all our lives, right? And still struggling to get there. Yeah, there's some ways that I can say has worked. One is that when I get asked for an architecture job, I turn it into something else. So I don't like to talk about architecture to my stakeholders. I use architecture as a tool, but I don't necessarily call it architecture when I talk to them. So I talk about the things they struggle with. I talk about the pains, the needs they have, and about their vision for the future. And then I find ways of being useful. And that very often includes architecture. And then I get some architects in, but I try to steer away from the A word as long as possible, because very often when you use the A word, they're already going into resistance and they, oh God, yeah, there you have them, right? Let's not do that because we don't have good experience with them. So that's one way of getting the stakeholders to soften and open up, is to hide basically your tools. That it doesn't matter what tools you use to them. What matters is what you can do for them. The other side that I've been working on for years now, and maybe I should be working on harder, and this is also why I hope this kind of community can help, is we need to change the attitude of our discipline.
Okay.
But it's not for nothing that people resist architecture, because a lot of architects have become quite arrogant, to be honest, and quite demanding and insisting that they are the single source of truth. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily make you loved anywhere. Right? Come down from our high horses and join the foot folk and realize also that you're just part of the business like everybody else, and that you should operate on their level, not somewhere in your ivory tower dictating the rules or wielding some arcane magic knowledge that they don't understand and makes you superior to everybody else. That's a very bad attitude. And there's too much of that going around. So difficult stakeholders, yep, sure, you have them. But we're also a difficult discipline to deal with. And we can change that.
That's really interesting, your points, Bard. And I've earlier on in my career, it was is it agile or architecture, because those two things didn't go well in the beginning of agile. So I can definitely reflect on some history lessons there. And there's just reading the chat, there's another question from Neve. Is it Neve? I think I've said that right.
It is, yeah.
Concept of caring can become skewed. How would you handle this scenario? You're an experienced woman applying for a senior role in a traditional patriarchal organisation. They said, we like that you're a woman to improve our diversity stats, but don't want to hire you just because you're a woman. They don't want to set you up to fail. How would you,
Yeah. Oh God,
how would you respond for that?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one. Thank you, Eve. That's
and Bard, no problem, but you can't use expletives, right?
Can't I? Who says I can't? If I do
Okay,
it with
sorry.
care, it should.
Being
I'll do this. I can't use expletives.
You can't use expletives. I know. No, this is a really tricky one because, first of all, the statement "we want to improve our diversity stats" shows that they don't care about diversity, right? That they care about the appearance of it. And they're not really trying to be diverse. I think one of the issues we have here is that we're still battling a culture that is far from diverse and is very slow to let go of their privileges. And I'm not talking about the men as individuals, but it's the culture itself that is defending some sort of principle and some sort of belief about people. And so you're battling a whole belief system. Personally, I've been in some kind of position like that, where I was just fresh in Australia and they talked about me being Dutch and that was a problem for them. But I've never experienced the kind of discrimination that a woman would get. And so I can't really speak from personal experience there. I can speak as a man in the room when it happened in situations where I was present. And I would immediately go to the heart of the matter and say, so that basically means that you don't care. So why are we even here? What discussion, what are you saying here really? And confront them. It doesn't give you the job, but it may start a discussion. It may start a conversation. I don't think if you get confronted like that there's any opportunity to get the job. A lot of other work needs to be done before they're ready to actually hire people for who they are. And that's a sad state of affairs. Like I said, I was not hired because I was Dutch a few times, and that felt really hurtful. But I can't even begin to imagine what it would feel to be not hired just because you're a woman. Even though you know that you're far superior to anyone in the room, you've already lost the battle. So that's what we need a community for. We need a community to start changing this. But that's probably a bigger community even than the women in architecture. This is a cultural issue that we haven't tackled yet, and that worries me greatly as well.
Really
sorry, Neve, but I don't have an answer there. So
no, it's good. It's actually you did answer it. Have courage. Be true to your own voice.
Yeah, maybe that's also really a good point you make there. If you have to compromise who you are just to get a job, I don't think you'll end up with what you expect and what you want. And you may actually reinforce the belief system, the very belief system that's hurting you so much.
And that misalignment with goals, that has not burn out as a fizzle out, or I've heard you use that, something along those lines. I had a question. I hope no one minds if I jump in. When we were planning this event, I made a joke about love languages and where they're different. But if I just apply that, given it's Valentine's Day yesterday, if I apply that, how do you draw alignment where there might not be some, when what you care about is quite different or at odds with what other people care about? And the example I've mentioned is when your business measures are at odds with each other or competing.
No. Well, that's where the drama is useful. And this I learned from an Israeli guy I met in Vienna, who actually teaches people to go into the drama, and even and being Israeli, he loves creating drama. I mean, I was married to an Israeli, and I know how much they like drama, but there's a reason for that. They bring out the drama so that people speak more from the heart, they speak more to what they really care about. And then you discover that, yeah, the details may differ, but the actual thing that everybody craves, desires, and wants is usually much closer to than they think. The differences are usually smaller, right? I think the principle here that he showed me and that I've been studying is this. Our minds are geared to see the differences and then amplify it. That's useful as a survival tactic, because if you're in a jungle, it really pays to know the difference between a poisonous plant and one that you can eat. And sometimes these differences are really small. So yeah, it's good to be tuned to small differences. But in a social context, that can become a real problem, because we immediately amplify any tiny difference that we notice. And we forget how similar we really are, both in, in outlook and beliefs and even in goals. So that's first step. Bring out the drama to really get people to say what they feel, and then reduce it back to, okay, these are what we feel, what we care about. How far apart is that really? What are the similarities? Can we work from the common themes? We can still cater for the differences, but differences don't have to be conflict. They're just differences. But first, get it out in the open, because as long as we don't talk about the actual feelings underneath, people keep working from the assumption that other people are really very different and they're really against us and they're really our enemies and opponents. And so even though on paper we agree, internally we haven't actually aired our feelings enough to know where we stand. Bring out the drama, then find the common ground. And often, not that often actually, you'll find that the common ground is stronger than the differences. So strong that you don't actually have to remove the differences. The differences are then just expressions of, individual variation, which is fine.
Love it. I haven't got any more questions in the chat, and just looking at the time, I think it's time to hand to Darryl to introduce the panel.
Right.
Thanks, Bard. That was brilliant.
Well, my pleasure. I'm now going to sit back and listen. I can relax now.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks, Bard. I really appreciate that. As always, love having our chats. So it's great to have you as part of this event. So yeah, I get to have a bit of a panel discussion now, which is fantastic. For those that have seen me before on online events, that's something that I do a fair bit of, and it's always very enjoyable to be able to bring people on and just sit and listen to their perspectives, and that's what we're hoping for today. So, Chritsine, if you go to the introduction slide, so we've got Miranda, Patten, and Maggy Thor joining us today for a discussion about their experiences with architecture and organisations and how it relates to the topic of today's meeting. So just a bit of a quick introduction. Maggy Thor. Maggy has an extensive experience in driving business transformation and operational excellence across diverse industries and regions. Currently at Macquarie, she initially established their business architecture practice before shifting her focus to lead the global data strategy and data architecture within their operations division. So tremendous amount of responsibility there. And joining Maggy is Miranda Patten. Miranda has established analysis, business architecture and data and analytics divisions for various industries, with recent focus on the banking and financial services sector. Currently at Ajaka, and I'm assuming that I got the pronunciation right. Close. Miranda's team provides specialist data and analytics services to various banking and wealth entities across Australia. Now, the company's core values are being curious, creative, collaborative and kind, and reflects both how they approach consulting practices to achieve authentic relationships and quality outcomes. So I thought that was really interesting as well. So this is a conversation to talk about, well, firstly, Miranda and Maggy, I thought I might ask you your perspectives on what Bard was sharing with us today, and also a little bit about your experiences in in the architecture discipline and working for caring organisations. So, Miranda, did you want to lead off in that conversation?
Oh, I was going to let Maggie go ahead, but I can. On that sort of feminine and masculine mindset. So I think the thing about architecture as a discipline and working in organizations is our role is to influence change. And I think we step into two mindsets with that. So we step into a very feminine and a masculine mindset. We hunt and gather for information, and then we've got to produce an outcome. And that really comes down to working with a vast array of individuals collaboratively, because our role is to influence change. And Bard, I appreciate your comment about teams, but I do find that a lot of the tools that I employ on a daily basis to do my role are taken away by Zoom meetings, etc. Most of my role is around relationship and around convincing and people seeing the whites of my eyes and authenticity. And I find that difficult to be as impactful in that influencing stage over this forum. I find that it's a very difficult thing that's had to adapt in our service offering and how I approach my day-by-day life every single day over the last few years. So my primary tools that I would spend a good 50% of my time on relationship and getting to know people and understanding those fear quotients that sit underneath individuals. I would spend at least 25% of my time on the technical problem and probably about 15 to 20% of my time on the solution. And the rest of it I spend on having a bit of fun, because otherwise it gets very boring. We are a discipline that does have a lot of ego. And I think breaking down, understanding that psychology and the things that come with that. We work for business people and they have responsibilities that they have to achieve. And as architects, our role, when you put architect in your title, I say this to my team all the time, I have expectations. And those expectations are typically around empathy for the client that they're working with. And I mean that whether I'm in a consulting firm or in a business. You are working with customers in that business and you have to have empathy for what they're trying to achieve.
That's
don't know whether that's sort of stuck with.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Miranda. I really like that. I talk about empathy with teams quite a lot, so certainly resonates with me. And Maggy, your perspective on today's discussion and your experience in organisations?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot to take out of that, and I loved your reflections there, Miranda, especially on the empathy and how important it is to get to know the person, the human being, before you start doing some magic together. And I think that's super important and shouldn't be ignored in whatever relationship you are working in or in whatever team settings you're in. And I think that's where architects could really shine. It's about connecting the dots, and those dots can be people as well, and sort of bringing them together and to get diverse perspectives and so on. Now, what stuck with me a little bit was, but you mentioned that, architecture as a discipline being not so diverse, maybe a certain stereotype that means I'm an architect. A story that came to my mind is that in my professional career, not that long ago, a few of us were asked to introduce architecture to graduates, so a graduate cohort, right? Now we got together and we're planning for that. And I guess the person that wanted to talk about the career paths for architecture wanted to really sort of put the spotlight on that, to be an architect, look at us, well, except you, Maggy, but look at us, we're all gray haired, we've got the battle scars, we've got the experience. And he really wanted to spotlight on that to a graduate cohort. But there was one, I guess, male that stood up and he said, no, hang on, I don't think that's right. I have got a very capable female, a young talent in my team that is absolutely knocking things out of the park when it comes to architecture work. So he sort of called that out in that setting and said, no, actually, this is not the message that we can be sending because it's simply not true. And that really stuck with me in that moment. But that was almost it was almost like a look at us, as architects, this is what it looks like. But no, it's not true. And that's something that I think we as a community can do a lot more of. And for the junior talent that aspires to be architects and want to connect the dots and I guess help achieve some great things with companies, let's help them. Let's invite them in and make them part of the group.
I love that. I've been talking to a lot of organisations lately about how architecture isn't about the architecture. It's about people, it's about relationships, and it's about communication. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of taking that sort of messaging and what you were just talking about, Maggy, and figuring out how we encourage the next generation of architects to come through and how we can appeal to more women to take it up as a potential career path. Your thoughts on that?
I think one of the quick wins that we can do is invite them along to events and sessions like this, right? Where we know of them, or if you know people that are interested, set up a quick coffee catch up, or in your organization or even broader, like let's just come together. I'm happy to share some perspectives, want to hear what interests you and see whether there's something there that we can work on together. It is hard to, I guess, find where that young talent is, or where that emerging talent, people don't wear that on their sleeves, do they? So it's how to create the right collision so that people, like-minded people, can come together and just start having conversations and create opportunities.
That's great. And Miranda, your thoughts on encouraging the next generation?
I think the thing that's hard, particularly for people who are entry into these types of roles, and I mean that exactly how I said it, is that it's an adaptive leadership role. So if you've really got to care and drive decisioning. If you, I had a mentor who was one of the EGMs of one of the banks when I was at the big, large black and red bank down in Melbourne. And when I left, part of my exit interview was with him. He's now one of the CEOs of the banks in the UK. And he said, you walk around here like the Pied Piper. You say stuff and people just do it. They throw money at you, no one knows why. But you make them believe in something and they just go, okay, fine. How will you be when you go to an organization that doesn't, or get a stakeholder that doesn't just say yes? Are you going to crawl in a corner and cry, or are you going to fight and drive it through? I'd be really interested to see what that. Now, I've kept in contact with him over the years. It's been really interesting. But that's every time I hit a wall, I get that in my ear. And then now talking about psychology, learning that craft of not being able to come across as nagging or preachy or arrogant or condescending, but still driving the influence of the decision just enough to not get necessary. You don't have to be right. You just have to be in the room and helping that outcome, whatever that outcome is. Sometimes it might go against your recommendation, but as long as you understand what the recommendation is, you can learn and grow forward. So having that decision and always creating that relationship that's lasting comes from mutual respect, and you respecting the others as well as others respecting you. And learning how to stay at that level is a thing that is actually not taught. It has to be learnt. And it's something where I feel that the community needs to provide more mentorship and advice. It cannot come through the universities. It's an experience exposure activity. It's not about being a woman or being a man. It's about learning how to stay in the conversation until that decision is made and then hold it through. That's where the arrogance needs to drop away, as Bard talked about, which I think I talk about. I've just had a very large conversation with a very, very, very large entity, and they had a problem. And I talked about the problem for 3 hours and said, this is what I think we ought to do. And they said, that sounds fantastic. What does that sound like? And I said, well, that's enterprise architecture. And they went, oh, we don't want that. And I said, oh, well, the discipline that's called is enterprise architecture. Yeah, that's the discipline. But what I think we need to do is, and at that point I lost them, because in their mind I was categorized, or that work was categorized into. Now it took me a long time to get them back again, and we have the conversation again. But you understand, it does come with a brand that has come through from years, and that brand has to evolve. that brand has to change, and the practitioners are the ones that need to change it.
Yeah, they're great points. Maggy, I see you nodding your head furiously there. Did you have any thoughts to share on that?
Absolutely. No, as you were talking, Miranda, I was thinking, yeah, it's a bit of a branding problem, isn't it? And who are best to change it than the people that carry the brand? So yeah, there's just that reflection there at the end of it. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So very quickly before we end, this is a very short panel discussion, but it's been really, really good. But I'm keen to get your insight into what a caring organisation feels like, what it's like to work in one. Maggy, do you have some descriptions of experiences you've had in the past that demonstrate what a caring organisation is?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, reflecting from experience, I think it's about just caring for the human being and showing that, and that the individuals, the humans are really role modeling that, irrespective of whatever the policy says and the standards and all that. It's about what the humans do when things get tough, or when we need to celebrate things together. I think it's about allowing feelings to come with you to work as well. Create a bit of drama, have a bit of a healthy tension, because it shows that you care, right? And within that, when you really unpack what the feelings are about, there will be some golden nuggets there about, the pain that people are feeling, or how we can improve on things. So that's what we need to draw on, but we need to allow that to happen. So allow the feelings to come and clock in to work with you. Have the psychological safety to then be able just to be who you are and show up, I guess, and support one another. And a recent example on that, I know we're sort of a bit out of time here, but last year, as an example, I had a bit of a tough time at work, had a bit of a break, and I had my manager show up for me, supporting me throughout everything. I had my previous manager rock up and show up for me. I had my whole team stand up and proactively look at what could we do to help Maggy in this situation. This wasn't written in any policies or anything. This was the people caring about humans. And now what I want to do is make sure I can pay that forward to whoever might be in the need for that as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Maggy. And Miranda, just to close out your experience in caring organisations.
Essentially, caring organisations come from are created by the culture of the people who are trying to drive them. So if it's of value to you, you name it, you talk about it. Culture comes from other people, from the people in that company. That is the culture. Maggy, I'd imagine that's your extraordinary leadership that's created that surrounding culture around you, and that you've been able to benefit from your own investment in your team and your people and those around you. And that's a perfect example of, for me, a really great day at work.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the idea of bringing the emotions into it, as bringing your whole self into it. I've talked to some people recently about the problem of toxic positivity, about needing to bring your best self to work every day, and just sort of it erodes the sort of humanity of the situation, and being able to present all of yourself in those situations, being in an environment that supports you to be able to do that, I think's a great thing for organisations to think about. I really appreciate your time today, Maggy, Miranda, in sharing all of that with us. And I think what you've hinted on there is about 6 more sessions that we're going to have to run on different topics. So we might have to get you back and talk about all sorts of things like mentoring and creating cultures in organisations. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Darryl.
No problem at all.
Thank you. And Heidi, I think it's over to you.
Thanks. And I've just written down toxic positivity. I'm like, it has a name. I'll add that to the toolkit. And so where are we at? We've had a big start since July last year. Was it June or July when we came together to start forming? So we were aligned with the global community, and we recently helped run an event for was Business Innovation, Leadership and Technology event. So we helped host a lot of the sessions, and that was really exciting to get people from the community involved. So we look forward to having more of those types of opportunities to help showcase our valued community. So we had an official launch. I've got some photos of those on the next slide, which I'll share in a second. And we were even able to sponsor an event in Brisbane, one of the training events, which I'm not sure if anyone, there was a couple of people on the call that were at those events. That was really exciting. And we were growing the network. So we've actively been recruiting new members. So I will mention the ask today. We do want to make sure that we're bringing people along for the journey. So reach out to anyone that you think has a right attitude and aptitude and appetite for radical change using architecture. And we do have we've launched the LinkedIn page for the organisation, and also a group which we will be actively recruiting new members to join. We're having meaningful connections. So we've been having a lot of conversations, in-person chats, digital chats. Through those events, we were able to really get out and talk to a lot of different people and hear what they need help with. So that's been really exciting, and we look forward to crafting different events and opportunities around that. And also we're in the process of building out a website. So we'll be able to do a launch of that in the coming while, and Martin's been really great to help us through that journey as well. So on to the next slide, please. I just wanted to share, there's a couple of photos from different events, so one is in Sydney, where we had met Maggy, which was brilliant to be able to connect in a meaningful way again since that opportunity in Sydney. And that's where we had Wendy presenting as well, among other speakers. And the bottom right hand corner, that's where Chritsine and Wendy had run a training event. So that was really for the architecture nerds out there, it was really cool. I certainly enjoyed that day. And we've got some photos with our logo wares as well on the left hand side there, and some of the community. So yeah, really exciting to be part of this, and I'm really pumped for where we can take it to next. We do have a growing community, so that signals to me that it is the right time for this change, and I'm really looking forward to all of us being on the journey to help change the face of what architecture looks like. Thanks, Chritsine.
No worries. So I get to do the wrap up, and just to let you know what's coming up, and perhaps some of these things you might like to either attend or help us to organize these events as well. So the first big event that we're hoping to run something is the International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. So way back in 2022 and 2023, Darryl's going to jump in and fill in pretty much when we started. Darryl, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So early 2022, I reached out to some of the amazing women in my global architecture network and asked if they'd like to contribute some material for a series of articles on the EAPJ, the Enterprise Architecture Professional Journal. And what we ended up with was some material that we posted on LinkedIn as an article featuring some commentary from some of the women in the group. And that sort of started the conversation going that led to the formation of WIA Global. So it was really exciting to be part of that conversation that sort of got everything underway. And so there's a link there. We'll share this pack, but there's a link there to the original article. The theme that year was Break the Bias. And so it was really sort of trying to get behind that theme and open up the conversation about, hey, we've got a problem here. Here's some stats to prove it. And here's some of the reasons why. And if you don't get what those reasons are, we'll read a little deeper because clearly we have a lack of diversity of experience and perspective and thought in our discipline. So that's where it started. And then 12 months later, I put up another LinkedIn post just reflecting on the fact that in that 12 months between the original article in 2022 and International Women's Day in 2023, we'd formed a global association. We had regular meetings occurring. We had members all over the globe dialing in for those sessions. Unfortunately, they're at usually somewhere around 1 a.m. on a Saturday morning for the east coast of Australia, not particularly friendly. So, of course, that led to the conversation about, hey, how about some regional communities? And Australia, I'm happy to say, is the first of those. And so we're setting the scene in terms of how to expand this reach globally and support people all over the world, wherever they are, and give them the opportunity to come together and have discussions like this. So I'm hoping that what we're doing there in International Women's Day every year is having this annual sort of announcement of where we are and how we're going and what we've achieved. So I'm looking for people to contact me with just a one-liner or a short paragraph about their thoughts on women in architecture, being a woman in architecture, how it might have helped you move beyond architecture into other roles, just sort of value propositions that we can share with everybody, so that we can post that as a representation of what the community is thinking. And I can talk a little bit about, isn't it wonderful? We not only have a global a leadership team, a global sort of organisation now, we now have these regional communities springing up. So I'll put a little bit about that, but I'd love to have some content from some other people as well. So please reach out to me about that. And Christine, did you want to talk about the morning tea?
Yes, absolutely. So for International Women's Day, we'd really like to have a WIA event at least in each of our capital cities, and have maybe people on the call or friends you might have in the capital cities that want to organize a group of people together, men and women, together to have a morning tea to celebrate the fact that we do have these wonderful women representing us in the architecture profession. So if you think you can help us to do that, please reach out to either Heidi, Darryl, or myself, and we can help support you to organize it. So at the moment, what we're thinking about is finding a speaker. We haven't yet found that right person yet to talk to us about their life and their journey related to the theme for 2024. So I think if we could gather each in a place in the capital city and we can all dial in at the same time to hear this wonderful woman speak to us and share her thoughts and wisdom, that would be a marvelous way for us to celebrate being women in architecture. Darryl, do you want to add anything else? Otherwise, I'll jump into what's next for establishing WIA here in Australia.
I'll just mention that if it's a case of sort of being able to leverage an existing morning tea that's happening and bringing architecture into that conversation, that's a great idea as well. So you don't necessarily have to take it all on yourself to create something from scratch. I know there's a lot of other activities going on, so it's a potential to bring architecture into that broader conversation.
Darryl, we can talk after this call.
Great, thank you, Miranda.
We're doing part of the ACS events that are happening on the 7th, which is the day before. So we don't have anything on the 8th. So we've got a beautiful space. You can have it.
Fantastic. Sounds awesome.
Cool. All right. So just some of the activity happening in the background in terms of establishing WIA as an actual organization. We do have a lovely volunteer who has many years of expertise in setting up not-for-profits, helping us to draft our constitution. So we're hoping to circulate that to everyone who's interested in becoming a member, so that they can have their input and provide feedback on the Constitution. Wendy Keane very generously has donated $600 to helping us to establish WIA. So we want to use those funds to help us register a not-for-profit company. The next step after setting ourselves up as an actual entity is to seek nominations for leaders in our capital cities or even regional areas if we have enough interest for members to join. These leaders will be the key points of contact for members to be able to organize local face-to-face events, but also having the support of people like Heidi, Darryl, and myself to help keep WIA right across Australia connected. We also want to send out a survey to all of you so that you can tell us what you would like to hear when we run an event such as the one we've had today. Again, this is a community where everybody has a voice, and we want to ensure that that voice is heard. So please look out for a survey. We'll, at the moment, because we don't have people's personal email addresses, only channel of being able to connect with you is via LinkedIn. So please, send us in your email addresses so we've got some way of contacting you directly, so we can send you things like the recordings and surveys and interesting articles that might be written by the community as well. So we can share that not just on LinkedIn, but through email as well. We want to gather at some stage once the constitution is drafted and we've got ourselves, a registered company, to set some KPIs for what success looks like for our community as well. That should be a key input into the constitution as well. So we're hoping the combination of the survey and being able to set KPIs will allow us to create a really robust constitution that really meets the needs of our community. As Heidi mentioned before, Martin is helping us to set up a website so that we have a channel that we can communicate with you and share additional information beyond what we're able to do through LinkedIn. We'll also be distributing a calendar of events so that you can actually mark these events in your diary. And that's why having your email address will really help us to be able to send you out calendar invites so you can block your diary out for when we have these events. So that's pretty much what we're busy working on. Again, Heidi, Darryl, Martin, and myself do get a little lonely and busy in our day jobs. So if anyone wants to help us with these tasks, feel free to reach out. On the next slide are our email addresses. So contact us. You're welcome to continue using LinkedIn, but if it's easier for you to send us an email directly, feel free to do so. And that's pretty much it, Heidi.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say another big thank you to Bard. He usually presents to really large groups throughout his career and stadiums and things. So yeah, I feel very privileged for him to help us along our journey and share some really key learnings with us this evening. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Don't be a stranger.
I was looking for the unmute button, but I wanted to say my pleasure. And, it was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And Bard's influence in my career has certainly been part of my motivation for being involved in WIA. So it's lovely to have you as our first event for 2024. So thank you. Please. Yep. Sorry, you go.
Sorry, Heidi. I was going to say thanks everybody else for turning up as well. We wouldn't have had this event without all of you signing in.
And a special thank you to our panelists as well, Maggy and Miranda. Thanks so much. Don't be a stranger. Please reach out, and I'm looking forward to the next event on International Women's Day. Thanks, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.